Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Woody Allen Adjacent, part of the Woody Allen Retrospective podcast that you are hopefully subscribed to. It's a new year, it's a new day, and we've got a very spicy one. James Daniel Walsh is my co-host on this journey. Sir, welcome back.
This will be a very interesting discussion, I think.
It will be. Before we get into it, on our last discussion at the end of 2021, we spoke about that movie Addicted to Love with Matthew Broderick and Meg Ryan. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a clip to that discussion on YouTube card. Also, we've got our own playlist of all the other movies we've spoken about. We've got a nice collection of movies that are spicy, that are unknown, that are well known, a nice variety of movies to discuss. And as you know, if you've been following this podcast segment or this project we're doing, I've got 3 tickets worth of movies to use, and this is my second one. And for this movie that I mentioned last month, the title, as you can see from this podcast description, is I'm taking James' job. I'm taking James's job that I give to him. James, what is the movie we're talking about this time?
Oh boy. Today we are talking about the shockingly 2005 film I Am A Sex Addict and I don't know if I'm pronouncing, can you pronounce his name? Because I'm not entirely sure.
It should be Caveh Zahedi.
Okay. Directed by, written by, and starring
Caveh Zahedi, yes. James, usually I ask your opinion at the gate, but before I do that, I want to lay a little bit of groundwork. Now, as I said before, this movie was my pick. This is a movie that is, I wouldn't say mired in controversy, but it's a controversial film because of the subject matter. The director himself has interested me more recently because I thought this movie was a one and done for him. But more recently, he's had a TV series called The Show About the Show, and it was interesting to see his whole film career. He's a American film director. He's always done quirky movies, and he has a very interesting philosophy that we'll get into, because this movie hits on one of his big philosophies in life about being honest. So when I saw that he's actually still continuing to work, and he's very well liked in indie circles. Directors like him. He's an indie darling, but in terms of success, I would say he hasn't risen to much fame. But this movie we're going to talk about, you can't really get it on streaming. You can buy it as part of a package of his own movie collection, which I purchased for the purposes of discussing it today, which I believe it's called Digging My Own Grave, which James actually helped me acquire, because in the UK I really couldn't get it, so we had to import it. I had to rip the movie, I had to share it with James. Now, I don't know at this point if we're going to discuss his other movies, but I'm interested in the director. I haven't watched this movie for a long time, probably over a decade. I just rewatched the movie yesterday, so I'm going to have a fresh opinion. My opinion hasn't changed that much, but now I'll set the stage. You know where I'm coming from. James, as a fresh experience, I don't believe you're aware of this director. Is that right?
Yeah, never heard of him before you brought it up.
Okay, so I put this movie in front of you. Didn't really tell you anything apart from the title, which you might assume some things. James, yeah, it's time for you to, talk about the movie. Let's have that discussion. What did you think of I Am a Sex Addict?
When I started it, I thought it was really funny. The first maybe half hour, I laughed. I not belly laughed, but I laughed pretty frequently during it. And then it started to get really uncomfortable. And to me, it's presented, it's autobiographical, and it's presented almost like a documentary, but with recreations of things that actually happened. And it gets really personal with other people, and then shows like ex-lovers that he's had, and then shows actual footage of those people. There's parts where he's talking about the actors in it. Like he breaks the fourth wall and here's the real actress. And I found out that she's a porn star. And at first I was like, oh, this is a joke. This is part of it. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh no, she's a porn star. And
Yeah.
did she actually lie about it? And then he discovered it. And if that's the case, clearly she didn't really want people to know that. And there's another part where he's like, one of the actresses who's playing one of his exes, one of his exes was an alcoholic, and it's like, here's the real actress, and by the way, she's an alcoholic in real life. And I'm like, that's got to be true, because I don't think anybody would want you to fictionalize that, but that makes me uncomfortable that you're showing us that. And what became really apparent, not only through the sort of fictional part of the movie where he's recreating things that have happened to him, but there's a part where it again breaks the fourth wall, where he says, in this scene, this actress is supposed to be giving me a blowjob, but the actress didn't want to do it. And then he cuts to, like, again, sort of behind the scenes footage, this actress looking really uncomfortable, and him saying, well, why don't you want to do it? And I just don't want to do it. Well, can you do it anyway? And I was like, dude, no.
Wow. Oh man, yeah. Keep going, James.
What became really apparent is that, the whole thing is about this guy having sort of a fetish for prostitutes. I think that, definitely that's one of his fetishes, but clearly one of his other fetishes is making women uncomfortable. And not just sort of, I'm going to go up to a prostitute and, ask her if she wants to, suck my dick and then walk away. But I'm going to make this actress uncomfortable. I'm going to make my girlfriend uncomfortable. I'm going to, he seems like there's something a little bit off with him. And like he can't quite read that. Either he can't read that he's making someone uncomfortable, or he's getting off on the fact that he's making someone uncomfortable. Either way, it made me uncomfortable. So
yeah. And the third option is that he doesn't care.
That's the third option, is he doesn't care. And it's funny because he sort of goes back and forth between, his performance is really flat. And after a while, you start seeing also behind the scenes stuff with him, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe that's not a performance. Maybe that's just him personality.
Yes.
Like the way he talks to people seems very detached. And like he can't quite understand why he's upsetting someone. Or he's doing it intentionally, or he doesn't care. And I can't really tell which.
Do you know what you would find fascinating, James? He's done a lot of interviews, written and with other actors and directors. And there's this interview with him. He's talking for a straight hour with a director. And I can tell you, one of the most surprising things is that pretty much he knows exactly what he's doing. And it's a combination of his philosophy in life and the kind of narrative he wants to present, which I'll get into in a moment. But before, I want everyone to hear this guy. So what I'll do is, I've got the trailer here. I'll play it, and then I'll interject with my opinion, because my opinion on this movie has changed. Because when I first watched it back in 10, 12 years ago, I thought it was complete fiction. I thought this movie was a mockumentary. I didn't really research it. And the way the film ended, I thought it was more of a redemption film. So I thought, oh, okay, well, the message is good. So, I'll just take it as a dark comedy. Only looking into the director more, hearing his intentions, seeing his previous movies, and then understanding what he's trying to do, is what really kind of blew my mind. So before I delve into that and illuminate the audience a bit more on what I'm talking about, let me play the trailer and then I'll talk about my thoughts on the movie, understanding the mind of the director a little bit more. Let's hear the trailer.
Okay, we're ready to go. Ready? Hi. Hi. My name's Caveh, and I'm about to be married. Show us more, please. My last 2 marriages fell apart because I used to have this sex addiction problem. For me, it all started in Paris about 7 years ago. Actually, I wasn't able to raise enough money to go to Paris, so if you could just pretend this is Paris and that I'm 23 years old. I have this prostitute fetish.
Hi, can I get in?
How much?
How much do you want to spend? Are you serious?
Krista, I can't keep repressing my lust. It's not healthy. At first, it was enough just to talk to them.
It can give him very much pleasure.
And to fantasize about them afterward. But after a while, just talking to them was no longer enough. Pardon.
Hey, I've been waiting.
I know, I'm sorry. I had a little masturbatory episode. I'd hoped that being completely honest would bring us closer together, but I had seriously miscalculated. Can I come down? One more time. I love you.
I know. Just please, go take a shower.
Yeah, I'm going to cut the trailer short there. Man. I always wanted to talk about this movie because I do see a lot of similarities. I'm just going to talk about the film in a bit more of a superficial way, first of all. In terms of the way it's constructed and the way as a film, as an entertaining piece of media, how it was projected to me as an audience member, I do find it entertaining. I do find him breaking the fourth wall, using animation, jumping back and forth. It's quite creative. And I think the documentary style he went for, well, maybe that's giving him too much credit. The movie looks old. It doesn't look very polished. It looks very cheap. But it gives this story a lot of more realness, because at first, for me, it was funny. But then as it goes on and as he repeats the cycle of feeding into his desires, it becomes really uncomfortable, disgusting and frustrating. And then it becomes grating. Even like, what is wrong with this fucking guy? This is really crazy. And his desire to be honest. But anyway, before I delve into all that, as a movie, it's interesting. But I think for a lot of people, if they can't see what he's trying to do or listen to him maybe after the fact, I've read a lot of reviews on IMDb. People said they couldn't finish the movie. They just couldn't get through it because they saw it as a repeating cycle. And at the end, I think what it culminates to makes more sense in the whole movie. But it's a very frustrating thing to watch. But I appreciate the story. I think it's a good movie. But unfortunately, for what he's going for and the story, I just think, although I can see a lot of similarities with him going through the previous partners like Woody Allen does and Annie Hall, and being a narrator again like Annie Hall, and a lot of people have compared him to Woody Allen for his self-effacement, for his dryness, even though Woody Allen's more of a joke teller, where this guy's clearly not telling jokes, he's just being himself. I find myself seeing this movie in different, not just as a movie, but this is his actual life. So it's very hard for me to kind of criticize the movie on a whole, because it does good, but it's a guy's life. So I'm very conflicted.
Yeah. I mean, I could see, the box set, there's a photo in there from when he was a kid. And I guess, he and his family were walking down the street and they ran into Woody Allen, and he got to take a picture with Woody Allen.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
And he included it in, part of the book for the box set. But yeah, I can see the Woody Allen comparison. I can see also, I felt like a little bit of John Waters in there. The difference is Woody Allen and John Waters are both charming. This guy's not.
No.
And I get what you mean about like the repetitiveness of it, and which is addiction. Addiction is a repetitive, repeating cycle.
And it escalates. In the movie, it does escalate as well.
That's the thing, is I didn't feel like it necessarily escalated enough, though, to justify it being... Like, the guy doesn't lose jobs the way other sex addicts do. The guy doesn't get arrested. He's picking up numerous prostitutes, and I'm waiting for that one prostitute who goes, I'm an undercover cop.
That's what I was waiting for. That is true. That is very true. Also, they don't really, he says he's a fledgling director that only gets invited to some indie screenings. I'm like, where's he get this money from?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
This sex isn't cheap.
He's flitting around Europe and picking up prostitutes, and I'm just like, man, well, this must be nice to just have. I don't see him having like a job. In fact, at one point he's like, having a job felt like it would be death to me, and I'm like, where are you getting your money from?
Yeah.
So that didn't at all endear him to me, because we've had that conversation before where, the plight of the privileged doesn't exactly move me. But it didn't escalate in that he sort of just repeats basically the same thing over and over again. It's, I want to go more than anything, get a blowjob from a prostitute, even less than having sex with them. And it's like, I'm really tempted to do this. Okay, I'm going to go do it. And now I'm going to tell my girlfriend that I did it. And, she's either, sometimes they're upset, sometimes they're understanding. But even when they're understanding, they're really upset about it. And he can't pick up on that. And so he's just basically doing the same thing. Oh, even he has in another very uncomfortable scene. He's not sure about actually having sex with a prostitute, and then what gets him there is that she says, rape me.
Yeah.
And that gets him going, and it's like, oh, and then at one point, like, he's telling his friend, like, I think to get over this, what I need to do is I need to go, like, treat them like shit.
Yeah.
And just live out this basically rape fantasy that he's got.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting, even if he ever did this, which I don't think he did, but if he ever really crossed that line, he wouldn't have put it in the movie because it would be, self-incriminating. But
in fact, he turns that part to one of the most comedic parts of the movie, where he decides to go and do that at a Asian massage parlor, and the person he's trying to do it with doesn't understand him. So it becomes this really awkward, and, it was kind of funny, but at the same time, very cringy and quite disgusting to hear him. And it's like, I see what you're trying to do, because it's deadpan. Like you said, the comedy, in a Woody Allen movie, he tells the jokes. His dialogue is funny. He's got sarcastic lines and proverbs and insulting. This guy's got none of that. It's purely his actions and the situation that are obviously over the top but true. That is the funny part. But as you pointed out, if you look at the realism of the movie, a lot of this is curated. Like, you don't see him going to work, you don't see him getting caught by the police, you only see the same scenes. And escalated before was the wrong term. It seems like he's trying to find a way to go more into his desires, at the same time not understanding that it's a problem, or why everyone's got a problem with it. And that is what I want to illuminate everyone to. If you watch his interviews, he has this big thing about being honest and honesty and living an honest life and not holding back. He says it in the movie multiple times, like, why lie to yourself? Like, this is, again, it's weird for me to say spoiler for the movie, but it's a pivotal part of the movie. That part that James just mentioned about him getting turned on by saying the woman says rape to him, that gets him there, gets him off, and he finally has sex with a prostitute. He then goes home and tells his girlfriend the same thing, even though he knows that she was raped, which is arguably one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen, and tone deaf. and then he's like, I miscalculated. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, that is not a miscalculation. That is a total disregard. And this whole movie, he continually is a slave to his desires. And on the one hand, it is frustrating and disgusting. But on the other hand, it's like you're getting to see this unabashed version or element that you don't see very often. And that is something I can respect as a filmmaker, him laying himself bare, because that is his intention. If you read his reviews, he wanted to unabashedly and unashamedly show all of his, most flawed parts, which a lot of people, to my surprise, critics, other film directors really praise the movie for, which I think should be praised on the one hand, but it isn't easy to watch. It is disgusting, and a lot of people will hate the movie because you're watching this man-child hurt people, hurt his partners, and feed his own desires at the same time saying, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with being honest? And it's hard to watch.
Oh, if this guy were more well-known, he'd have been Me Too'd by now. But no, it's funny. This just popped into my head as far as like somebody being unabashedly honest about something awful. And that is, do you remember like a few years ago, Liam Neeson did an interview?
Oh yeah, the racist interview. I killed a black. I wanted to kill him. It was a black guy. It was in the UK. I think he said that one of his female friends, was raped by a black guy, and he just wanted to attack the first one. He was so angry, even though now he knows it's wrong. He came out and said he was so angry, he just wanted to attack and kill the first black guy he saw. Anyone that would just fight with him, he wanted to engage. And he came out and admitted that flippantly on an interview. And then obviously he got cancelled, and he came on and did this big interview. I'm not sure if it was on Oprah or if it was on another talk show, but he had this thing where he came out on an open stage and do that. And funny you should bring that up, because that's the question. If someone's completely honest about a massive failing on themselves, should they be praised for coming forward and outing themselves, or should they be strictly condemned?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, when I started thinking about the Liam Neeson thing, because I saw the interview where he initially talked about it, and he did say, if it had been a German guy, he'd have gone out looking for the first German guy, that he could beat up. And I'm watching this, and I'm watching somebody be so shockingly honest about. And it was like, I think why people thought it was sort of flippant was he was doing an interview for some movie, some stupid action movie that he was doing. And it's like, well, feels like a weird place to bring this up. But I thought afterwards, when everybody was like going at him, I was like, this is somebody who is being so honest about something that no one else would admit. They might think it.
Yeah.
They might have actually gone out and had that same feeling. And if we can talk about this thing, if we could sort of discuss, why did he feel this? Because that's, I think, what he was like, I know it's wrong. I feel awful that I thought that. And I kind of admired him a little bit. I was like, that is a hard thing to cop to.
Yeah.
However, in this case, when it comes to, I forget again, Caveh?
Yeah, Caveh Zahedi. Yeah.
Yeah. This felt somewhat exploitative in that he's making a movie that he wants to sell, and it's a comedy, and he's presenting it as a comedy, and it felt exploitative to me. It was like, on the one hand, it's him being brutally honest, and he's not like, this girlfriend of mine was awful because she couldn't accept that I wanted to go out and have sex with a prostitute. He's saying like, this was a failing on my part, but without really, while at the same time profiting off of the fact that this happened and he did these things. When Liam Neeson did it, it was sort of like, I felt like he had to have known in that moment that he was like, I could be destroying my career right now. But I'm going to say this because I think it's important to start a conversation. This didn't feel like it was, and I will compare it to this, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a movie that came out like 10 years ago with Gwyneth Paltrow and Mark Ruffalo, where Mark Ruffalo played a sex addict. And I got about halfway through that movie where I was like, this movie's bullshit. This is such glossy Hollywood crap.
Yeah.
And I was, Josh Gad is in it. And I hated it. I stopped the movie because it was making me angry. This is a better movie than that was, because this is honest about what a sex addict would do and think and how he would behave. And like I said, the fact that it is repetitive is what addiction is.
Yeah.
But without that escalation where he ends up losing everything, and you know, he maybe one of his, again, he's going by what actually happened to him. And what happened to him really wasn't a lot. It was, I ran through a couple of girlfriends, and I guess I hurt them, but you know, he didn't lose his, I think he had a scholarship at one point to a film school. He didn't lose that. He never got arrested. He didn't go broke. He didn't, you know, miss an important job interview because he had to go jerk off first. These things that when you see him in the scene where he is actually attending a sex addict anonymous group, these guys are talking about how their lives were ruined.
Yeah.
And he's just sort of like, well, I guess I screwed up a couple of times. And I'm like, maybe your story isn't the story that really deserved the title, I Am a Sex Addict.
That's a very fair comment. I can't disagree with anything you said. I'll go back to a point you made, because when he did show the outtake of him saying, you know, I asked her to do this scene with me where she gives me a blowjob and she didn't, and here's that part which I'm like, why did you choose to have that in there? Because obviously he got a permission, because all the actors are cool with him. Like, he shows even the girlfriends or exes, he would say that we don't talk anymore, but you know, he's a picture, and apparently he got permission to use that. But why did he choose, especially when you said he says do it anyway? I mean, I'm like, look, if that was meant to be really funny, that was a fucking fail. That was not funny at all. In fact, as you said, you can see why someone would find it exploitative. That you're right, she's aware that maybe she thought it was funny, keep it in, but because he's so deadpan, it can be easily be misconstrued, and it was. Well,
here, and just to interject real quick,
yeah,
that is sex addict behavior. You know, it's that moment of him saying to her, "Can you just do it anyway?" That's a sex addict. He's wanting to have her simulate oral sex on him, and when she says no, he's just kind of desperate for her to do it anyway. So it is him, I think, out of control. At the same time, I've never been, I've known plenty of addicts in my life, and I've never taken it as an excuse. You know, like, well, I'm an alcoholic, and that's why, you know, I, whatever, stole from you, or I'm a drug addict, and that's why I, you know, it's like, okay, well, the fact that you did this, the fact that you're an addict isn't my problem. And so I'm not going to let you make it my problem, and good luck to you. But, you know, I'm not going to participate in this. And I guess the fact that he's presenting himself as completely out of control, while at the same time, not really being completely out of control. He's just sort of making people uncomfortable and not really having much in the way of consequences for it.
This film makes me think a lot about a couple of friends. I've had friends in the past that say to me, you know what, I always speak the truth. I never lie. I don't find a reason to lie. It's better to be honest with yourself, which is, again, it's a philosophy in life that even through all of his project, he's a massive believer in being completely honest. and to the point where, not in an aggressive way, like, you know, if you lie, I'm better than you. Whereas, what's the point of lying? If I'm honest, then it's just better, because if I lie, it will come out in the end. And I think being honest all the time, or pretending to be honest all the time, because I don't think it's possible to go around and not lie. I just don't think it's possible. And I feel like you're unburdening yourself. Like if I walked around and I saw someone on the street, a beggar, in my head I'm thinking, get a job. But I ain't gonna walk like, hey, you get a job, or you stink, or I hate you, you're ugly, fuck you. And these are thoughts that go through everyone's mind, random thoughts. You can't go through life like that. And in this movie, I was shocked to find out that, wow, this is really his life, to the point where I believe the woman he married in the end of the movie is his real wife.
I think that was his wedding ceremony, and he was actually filming that on the day. Which,
again, in a way, is cool, but it's like, dude, that's your real life. I mean, this is kind of the amazing and exploitative and disturbing thing, where it's like, in the series, by the way, that that's more recent. It was, I think it just finished last year. It's called The Show About the Show, which is him trying to get a TV show, and basically every episode is about the making of the previous episode. Again, it's very meta, and he does it well. It's actually quite entertaining. It's not very long. It's on YouTube for free, so you don't need to pay anything to watch it. I watched the first 3 episodes, and I thought, this guy really is about that life. This guy really is living that way, and you can see to this day how it affects him. And it's just like, he has a certain belief that is it's a very interesting way to live, and it makes for interesting movie and TV show. But it's fucking crazy. It is kind of wild. And, you know, watching this movie now and knowing everything about the director and his philosophy and his previous movies, he's got a lot of movies, and it's the same kind of concept, weird but honest, in these biographical kind of takes. He has this movie called The Sheik and I. Wow, that's and that's just not even about sex or anything. It's about a religion, I believe, about a specific topic that he got a lot of shit for, a lot. And that, I think, actually you can find a lot of interviews him talking about that. It's just he's a very interesting character, very interesting philosophy, and as a filmmaker, that makes him unique. And from the reviews I read, to my surprise, most of the reviews are positive from critics and directors. Audience and the general Joe Block or Joe Smith or whatever, they think it's kind of narcissistic and self-indulgent and just, you know, man-childish. And I see it straight down the middle. I can see both sides. And again, this is one of those situations where you might want to separate the artist from the art. But it's very hard in this instance because it's his life. This is the story of his life. These are real people. But at the end of the day, at the very end, if you get through the end of the movie, he is trying to he seems to have learned a positive lesson from this. But in saying, you know, the people like when you said that, you know, we didn't see some of the more real elements in his partners. I know not everyone has the same, you know, everyone's different. Everyone has different experiences. Michael Fassbender did that movie Shame, again, about sex addiction, really popular. But, you know, that was a Hollywood type movie with a Hollywood type gleam on it. And although it was dark and it went into it a bit more and it did destroy his life, you know, if you compare that movie to this one, you might say one's kind of sugar-coated, where this one's even more gritty. But, you know, I'm even getting lost in my thoughts on this one. I think this ultimately is a good movie. I think it's a creative movie, but it's not an easy one to watch. I respect the director and I think he does some creative things, but I understand a lot of people don't like him. A lot of people don't like the subject matter or his philosophy on life, which I kind of disagree with myself. But at the same time, I can't deny that what he did here was different. It was interesting. And although it's low budget, it does stand on its own as something that stands the test of time for its brashness, I guess. And he's a very meek, fugly, quirky director, but he's bringing something different to the table. So, look, I liked the movie the first time I watched it because I thought it was fake. Knowing everything I know now, I find it a lot more questionable. But in saying that, I'm like, that's just because I don't agree with his ideology. But I do like the message of the film. Ultimately, I just think maybe if Woody Allen did this, it would be a lot more actually funnier. It would have more jokes, and it probably wouldn't be as repetitive and a bit shorter. Yeah, if Woody Allen made this movie, especially with the things that went on in his life, he wouldn't have made this movie. But in his early days, in the early days before Dylan, in the 70s, I could see him doing something like this in one of his early first 5 films. And I could see Woody Allen making this work as an early slapstick comedy. As for Caveh Zahedi in the early 2000s, this movie was kind of controversial, still controversial to this day. Oh, and lastly, before I let you say your last piece, James, or however you want to continue, James, I went on YouTube to see a review of this. And there's a review of this movie there's a channel called Film Threat, and there's these 2 critics talking about the movie, and one's a woman, and she mentioned a part of the movie which I kind of writ off, but she said the worst part of the movie wasn't even any of his, disregard to not the arguments, not the continuous prostitutes. It's one little exchange he says where he looks at his girlfriend at one point and says, "For the first time, I see you as like a person with thoughts and feelings." And she says she found that so abhorrent and disgusting she couldn't continue watching the movie. And I can see why that line, apart from everything, that he finally saw a woman, I think it was a woman that accepted, his love for prostitutes. I think when he said that line, it was a really, probably one of the lowest points of the movie, in that I didn't think of it that way. But from a female perspective, I was like, wow, I could definitely see how this could be very
Triggered.
There you go. Very triggering for a lot of women. But anyway, James, my mind's getting all jumbled up. Let me let you go on and say what else you thought about the movie.
Well, first of all, just to follow up on the Woody Allen thing, he could have made that as a slapstick back in the 70s, but I also think 90s Woody, like if you looked at Husbands and Wives and Deconstructing Harry, both brutally honest movies.
True.
He could have done it in a more serious, still kind of comical way, but he could have done it a more serious way. But I'm going to tell you a little story real quick.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Back probably actually around the time this movie came out, I was working on a film project, and there was this Australian singer who was living in LA. I was living in the LA area, and she did a song for the soundtrack. And she said, "Hey, it's my birthday this weekend. Why don't you come on up, come on up to my house, and because I'm going to have a party." So my buddy and I go up there. And it's this beautiful house in the Hollywood Hills, and sign in the front says "Go around back." So we go around back. The first thing we see is this woman standing by the pool, and she's painting. She's got like an easel up, and she's painting. And like the party is sort of going on around her, and she's just sort of standing there painting. And we go in the house, and there's some guy playing guitar. And there's this other guy in the corner, and he's reading his poetry while people are sitting around and listening to it. And, my friend and I, we sit down on the couch, and he looks over at the guy next to us, and he says, "So are you an artist too?" And the guy looks at him and goes, "Aren't we all artists?" And my buddy looks at me and goes, "Let's get the fuck out of here." And we got up and we left, and we went to a bar, and we actually ended up at the bar. If you've ever seen the movie Swingers, we went to the bar where there's the horrible nightclub act.
Oh yeah.
And we hung out with them that night. But the point of my story is I fucking hate pretentious people. And there's a fine line between people will say, well, you hate pretentious, but you watch the Woody Allen movies. there's a very, very fine line where there's a difference between kind of pretentious, but really, like Woody might talk about Truffaut, but he does so in a funny, entertaining way. And there's nothing wrong with liking Truffaut, and there's nothing wrong with liking, going to European countries and looking at art and liking jazz and all these things that are kind of pretentious. And then there's that line of, well, I'm an artist, and my work really represents my life, and doesn't it represent all life? And that's when I go, fuck you, I'm out. And that's what I felt from Caveh, was just like, I got this feeling of like, if I were around him, I would not like him. And at first, like I said, that first half hour where I wasn't really sure what I was watching, I laughed at certain things. There's a part where he's talking about how he flagellates himself over his desires, and then it shows him up on a cross, and he just looks at the camera and goes, "Can I get down now?" And that made me laugh, and some of the stuff made me laugh. But the more that I started to realize, holy shit, this is all real, the more I started to just go, okay. Like, really, after that scene where he asks the actress to just, can you just do it? That was when I don't like you anymore. I'm not rooting for you anymore. Because this isn't something, it's not like he's telling a story from the past and he's recreating this moment where he did this thing that he should be embarrassed by. This is behind the scenes footage. And like I said, when I looked into it afterwards, I thought, I hired this actress to play my ex-girlfriend. And it turns out she was a porn star. But she didn't tell me that in the interview. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. You're making up a thing. And then I look at it afterwards and I'm like, no, that happened.
Yeah.
But especially once it gets to the part with the girlfriend who's an alcoholic. Because it almost feels like he is driving her towards drinking.
Yeah.
Like she is reacting. And that is never addressed. It's never addressed, like where he's like, I felt really guilty because I think, she felt really bad about my behavior. And that's why it was just sort of like, no, she had a problem. She was an alcoholic. And I'm mad at her about that. And it's
obviously, I didn't want to say too much, but there's a tragedy there as well, which I was surprised that I forgot. I'm like, oh, you fucking serious? Because that's when I realized the first time I watched it, I'm like, that is not a joke at all. That actually happened. And then when I watched it again, I'm like, you gotta be. And then obviously he says it in a sympathetic voice. Well, he says it in the same droll, slow, soft voice. He's a very soft-spoken man. So, and he just says it and moves on, and I'm just like, that alone, a lot of people would walk away from the movie like, fuck this, I'm out.
Well, and you were saying that he got permission to use the actual home movie footage of the real people.
He asked, because there was a lot of backlash for this movie, James. There was a lot of backlash. You can go online. He's spoken about it multiple times. People always, I will link in the podcast description a 1 hour YouTube interview he did talking about this. He is heavily criticized continuously for, again, you can't call him antics because this is his personality. He just has a very strong belief in honesty, but being honest is fine, but he has this thing about it just seems unnecessary to add certain things in where it's kind of like, dude, this just seems like, why?
That part bothered me because I figured that the rest of them, I'm like, he had to have gotten permission to show this footage. But then that woman is not around anymore to give permission.
Yeah.
And
it seems a bit tasteless. It does seem a little bit like, dude, man, come on. I know it's not, the two are not related because obviously he didn't cause that to happen to her per se, but it just feels like
he didn't help.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like it shouldn't be mentioned, but I understand why he used that because that wasn't even his breaking point, funny enough. But it was for me, that was an escalation, seeing him try to find someone that would help him with his cravings. And then even this person who's cool, who's like, hey man, do you man, keep doing you. And then the scene where they're driving the street, sees a prostitute, like, yeah, go back, man. And he's just talking to them, and then he's completely forgetting about the person in the car. And then later he's like, hey, I just want to bring up, like, I ain't being clingy or nothing, but a lot of women wouldn't sit there and, you know, let you just forget they existed while you're doing your thing in the fucking car. But, you know, I just want some appreciation. You can do what you want. And then the funny thing is, I have to bring this up because same conversation. He's like, I can't believe she was so cool, and then she brought up something to show she has boundaries. Then she's like, yeah, just don't fuck in my bed. And he was like, wow, I was kind of disappointed because I thought that, you know, for her, it was everything was on the table. I'm like, motherfucker, come on. Yeah. I'm like, come on, man. Come on.
I'm at least glad that what I thought was going to happen didn't happen, where he crossed that line anyway, because he thought, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. Well, and there's a lot of like, I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. And it's like, and then when there's another girlfriend of his who she fools around with somebody else.
That's hilarious.
And he gets jealous of that, and it's like,
that's comedy.
I'm just thinking, here's another, like, again, clearly this is his life, so this probably never happened, although his whole life, well, I'm always honest. I'm thinking, bitch, you have probably left a lot out that you
definitely.
But in another movie where a sex addict is addicted to prostitutes, it could have been, he's reckless, he doesn't use protection, he goes home to his girlfriend, and she ends up with some sort of venereal disease or something.
Yeah.
Again, it's just that, like, the consequences for him are all, well, I had to find a new girlfriend. Because that's how he kind of presents it, is he doesn't present it as, my relationship ended and I was devastated. He presents it as, my relationship ended and I had to go find a new girlfriend. I never got the feeling that he transcended that, like, moment where he says, I saw her as a real person for the first time, or I saw a woman as a real person for the first time. I never got the feeling here, and I'm sure his wife was okay with, hey, on our wedding day, I'm going to record this monologue before I go out there, and then I'm going to record our wedding ceremony, and I'm going to put that as the end to my movie. I'm sure she was okay with it. It's not like he was sneaking around doing it. But I'm just thinking, you're still using women. You're just doing it in this, well, my art is my life kind of a way. This pretentious bullshit kind of a way where it's like, this is your wedding video? I don't know, because the Wikipedia page that I was looking at, it talks about his career, but it doesn't talk about his personal life. Yeah. I cannot imagine that he's still married to that woman.
He is, and they argue in the new series, the show about the show, which the Wikipedia should say it's a kind of a sequel to this movie, the show about the show. You watch YouTube. They're arguing all the time. His philosophy gets him in trouble with women who even seem accepting at first, but over time, to each his own. Listen, I think that a certain personality sometimes attracts. Like, you might find someone that is similar to you in your beliefs and your personalities, whether you're in film. And obviously, even in this movie, he found someone that was cool with his, sex life and prostitutes. And maybe this woman, before they got married, this is third wife, I think, before they got married, she knew everything. She knew the movie was coming out. She knew his sorted past, his prostitution addiction, all that. She knew it all. But eventually, it gets to a breaking point. I think they got kids, by the way. Eventually, it gets to a breaking point where it's like, I just don't agree. And, I completely agree with you, but I do think that he's finding people that are very similar to his belief system, and that's what's going to happen with some people. So I don't feel sorry for people who get together with people that you're getting into. And these women, because he's honest, again, he's honest. So he tells them who he is, what he's about, They get involved, and I think his life, by the way, his life is about film. And it's, pretentious, sure. No doubt, because one of his movies, he did a, before YouTube and blogging, I think back in 1999, 2000, he did a video a day. I think the movie's called My Life in the Bathtub. I've got it as part of his movie collection. He used to do a vlog a day for 15 minutes, and he turned it into a movie. And I think that movie, part of the clip is that even in 9/11, even when 9/11 happens, it's part of the movie as well. He's always been this way. This is a part of who he is, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that find him just insufferable and pretentious and, holier than thou and just weird. And if you watch this interview on YouTube, he is who he is.
I mean, the wife has to be, because, it shows footage of their actual fights. And there's one point, where she's talking on the phone to somebody and she's just bawling her eyes out. And she's like, he's still filming me right now.
Yeah.
And I'm watching that, and I'm thinking to myself, and again, they're still together, so she must have okayed for this stuff to be in the movie. But I'm just thinking to myself, it's what you were saying about like it being self-indulgent to say, I never lie. What's the point of lying? There's also just omitting certain things.
Yeah.
He shows up to see his girlfriend, who is not okay with any of this stuff. And he says to her, you hear it in the trailer, I'm sorry I'm late. I had a little masturbatory situation. And I'm thinking to myself, or you say, I was getting gas, which was what he was doing when he sees the woman that triggers this. And I'm just thinking, I was getting gas. It's still the truth.
James, let me give you another scene, and then we'll kind of wrap this up, because this movie provokes conversation. Even nearly 15 years later, with his show, which is again in the same theme as he is just not afraid to talk about anything, even in this show about the show. I know this is like a double review because now I'm talking about his YouTube show, the show about the show, because in that show it's about the movie industry, the TV series, what it's like to get a TV series. He goes to the producers and them turning them down. And again, he's filming everything, just like he does in this movie. And it's just like fascinating, frustrating, and I guess borderline pretentious. But in that series, the YouTube one, he's actually got some Hollywood stars in there helping him. So he is still liked. There was something else I was going to say, but now I lost my train of thought. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up and say this. There's a lot of films about sexual addiction. Funny enough, and here's a shameless plug to my own YouTube channel. One of the early videos I did was on a movie by Lars von Trier called Nymphomaniac.
Yeah.
Volume 1 and 2. I've reviewed both. And again, this is about sex addicts. Shame, Sex Addict. A movie that people have asked us to talk about, Don John, which is about porn addiction, not about a sex addict, but I guess they can be argued in the same vein. This is another, even the Samuel L. Jackson movie with Christina Ricci, Black Snake Moan.
Black Snake Moan, yeah.
Yeah, has an element of sex addiction in there as well. This is another movie you can throw in that realm. We spoke about Bliss as well, which was more to do with sexual assault more than sex addiction. But I mean, I find movies that deal with sex and human nature and sexual elements to be quite fascinating, because they explore a part of the human condition which is really interesting. And sex is a big part of all of our lives, but sometimes it can rule our lives. Caveh Zahedi, as this film goes, showing this part of his life, he exposed himself as a very peculiar character, and again, I'll say it again, I appreciate his brashness, his honesty, I do, and I'm sure I'm sure we've learned a lot about addicts through watching this movie, and even all the movies I've seen after that deal with sex addiction. This movie is special in him and his honesty and his philosophy, which makes this film unique. And as a whole package, I think it's a unique movie, but not an easy one to watch. We've spoken about how we feel Woody Allen will tackle it, and I'm glad I brought it up I don't really. I'm still conflicted about the movie, but I will say this: I don't regret watching the movie. I appreciate the movie in its own right, and the director. I will speak about him again on his other movies, but I'm just gonna do that on my own YouTube channel, just because he's just a weird guy. He's just he's just a weird guy who made this movie that has stood the test of time. Roger Ebert, I think he praised the movie because it was refreshing and whatever. But yeah, guys, you can't find it on streaming. No. You're gonna have to buy it or get it secondhand, which is not hard to do actually. But you can find. I think there's a YouTube. This movie is quite explicit, even though things are covered. It's explicit enough that it wouldn't be on YouTube.
I was actually curious because there is a sex scene where they sort of put a black box over, and I'm like, did they do that because he's actually having sex with this woman?
Maybe. And that's too real, isn't it? Is that not too real, James?
I'm just saying, too, like, it was comical the first couple of times, but this guy's O-face got old real fast.
Yeah, that was crazy, man.
I was just sort of like, and I'm just thinking to myself while I'm watching it, I'm like, are you going to address the fact that it seems like you come within about 10 seconds?
And he doesn't complain, too. There was one scene he got in the car, and it was literally 10 seconds for $40. I'm like, that don't seem right, but
no, and it's every time. It's like I'm just watching, and again, the first couple times I'm like, oh, the woman has barely touched him, and he's already like, in the absolute throes of ecstasy. And then after a few times, I'm like, what is wrong with this person that this is happening? I don't understand. Why would anybody sleep with this man? Like.
Well, let me ask you, putting your criticism of him aside, would you recommend this movie in any way, shape, or form, just based on the content and narrative and the story he's trying to project out?
As far as a movie goes, it is an interesting movie. Like I said, it does start to get a little bit repetitive because the sex addiction doesn't escalate into something dramatic.
Sure.
He's making something that really is. It's almost sort of like, again, to go back to Woody Allen, it's like Martin Landau in Crimes and Misdemeanors. He has his mistress murdered, but nothing happens to him. Like, that's the point at the end of the movie. He's sort of like, well, sometimes you don't get caught, and it's just this thing that happened in your life, and then you move on.
Yeah,
this is. The difference is that story was compelling, and this one isn't to me. It's interesting, and it's like, this is this guy's journey. This is what happened to him. But there are so many other people who have a sex addiction where the story would have been more compelling, it would have been more heartbreaking, and it would have been more reflective in that, like I said, especially when I'm thinking about like the girlfriend who is an alcoholic, they don't establish beforehand that she's an alcoholic. They do show her, they're constantly smoking weed or doing mushrooms together, but it's not until they go to that trip in Europe, and he's like, I want you to watch me with a prostitute and all this stuff, where she starts to just go out and get shit-faced constantly. And he doesn't take any responsibility for the fact that, that this woman, he was just breaking this woman.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's saying, no, I'm cool with it. But he at least is self-aware enough to where the actress was playing it the whole time like she really wasn't cool with it. I mean, you see it on the actress's face, like, I'm kind of disgusted with all of this.
Yeah.
But he never addresses it to where he goes, I feel bad for my part in what happened to this woman. It's just sort of, this happened, and then she gets drunk, and now I'm mad at her because she's an alcoholic, and we break up, and oh, she died.
You're right.
And that's the thing is, I'm a big proponent of you don't have to like your main character.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most interesting characters are the characters who, you're stuck with Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver. He is a detestable human being, but you're stuck with him and you have to see things from his point of view and you have to understand him. I never really felt like I understood this guy. I feel like he doesn't really understand himself.
Yeah.
And so that's why, to me, the whole philosophy he has of complete brutal honesty all the time, I'm watching it and I'm like, you're not even being honest with yourself for a lot of this stuff.
He didn't understand that he was a slave to his own desires, and he never saw a problem with it. He just made excuses. And to be honest with you, he says he had a breakdown, but if what happened between him and his alcoholic friend didn't make him break down, I don't know what did, because I don't know what the breakdown. I think the scene before he ended up in the AA, sorry, not the AA, the essay, Sex Addicts group, was I think he basically was having a blowjob in the street where everyone can see. Yeah. He was just, and then that was his rock bottom. And I'm like, as a narrative, as you said, it should be more dramatic. That's not really, that's just you tearing, like about to get in trouble, but we never see it because possibly, as you said, James, it just might not have happened. And as a narrative part of the story, it's not really the strongest turning point to then pivot into Sex Anonymous, but I know we're nitpicking a little bit.
Well, and I just, for me, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, we bring up like other directors who are, they do sort of more pretentious things, like you mentioned Lars von Trier earlier. Obviously, Woody Allen is the point of this whole podcast, and if you brought up like Werner Herzog or David Lynch or John Waters, they're all kind of pretentious, but each of them is a person that I would love to sit down and have a dinner with and just talk to them. I would never want to meet Caveh. I'm not really interested in hearing about his philosophy. I'm not really interested in the things that he doesn't feel to me like an interesting person. His story isn't particularly interesting. What's interesting about the movie is that it is so honest to the point of making you uncomfortable. And I've never had that experience. I'll admit, I've never had that experience before in a movie where I'm like, this is honest to the point of, I feel like, one, I shouldn't be seeing it. Like I'm watching something I shouldn't be seeing, like it's a private thing. But also, it's basically somebody who has a private journal, but then they get up and they read it in front of everybody, and they're like, actually, could you come up and act it out with me? Yeah. And that's it's interesting to see it. Would I ever go back and watch it again? No. Yeah. Would I recommend it to somebody? I would have to recommend it to somebody with I'd be like, if you've ever been raped, if you've ever, had somebody cheat on you in this way, if you've ever, many, many caveats before I would say, watch this movie.
I don't know who I would recommend this movie to per se. It's all I can say is this movie is an extreme depiction of a very peculiar sex addict, a very honest and uncomfortable depiction of a sex addict that, again, you can put in the group of others Hollywood have made, but this one is a bit more intense just because of the way it is and the honesty of the actor director, who again, isn't the most noteworthy creator and hasn't risen to fame and is not as popular as some other actors we mentioned earlier in the podcast. But this movie is his claim to fame, which he himself isn't really, I don't think this, he's not really proud of this movie. He says he's actually, he said himself he had to Hollywood down this movie.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he said this is actually the watered down version. This is not how he wanted it to be, actually. He said
I'd be shocked if it wasn't and again, I don't know, but I feel like, are these actual prostitutes that he brought in to do this movie with him, because if he's so dedicated to everything being so honest, did he just go to a brothel? Did he just say, hey, I'm going to pay you not for sex, but to simulate sex with me and be in this scene?
I think, and maybe I'll say this. I want to believe that the actors in this movie have the same belief system as him, which I find very, hard to believe, because he's a very special character. And I don't mean to be condescending to say that, but I just feel like, sometimes he said his best friend is also a producer on the movie as well, Greg. Again, real life friend.
I was just thinking of this.
Yeah. And I'm just like, this guy who was filming the opening shot, all of the helping him do the narration, everything. I mean, I feel like they all like him. Like, everyone who wants to help him, he's got a lot of help. His current show on YouTube is it's a cable access show, but they have an app and they just put his show on YouTube. Read the comments. People, he's very well liked, even in the distribution for the box that we bought, his collection of films. It was distributed, so he has got backing behind him. Maybe that, I know we've gone on and on, guys, sorry. I know you might think, just fucking wrap up the podcast. Like, just let me finish and say this. Maybe that he's so honest and people just feel like, this guy can tell stories and narratives I wouldn't. We need to have this guy on. I don't know if people in Hollywood, all these little labels, are just using him because he's so, I just use the word edgy. I know it doesn't, saying the word edgy is like, come on, guys. But yeah, it's a bit cringe to say edgy, but he's edgy in his own way, and they're like, you know what, we need to fund this guy because he's working on the razor's edge of sensibility. I don't know, James. Maybe I'm talking out my ass.
I mean, I was just thinking of like that scene where he's telling his friend, who I think that was Greg, where it was like, maybe I need to go to get a prostitute and like treat them violently and everything, and his friend's just like, wow, man, like
yeah.
Like, even I think that's these people might like him and they might maybe respect his honesty or whatever, but there's many moments in the movie where there's people who say that they respect his honesty, and then they're like, dude, that is too much.
It won it won a minor award at Sundance, didn't it? He got a couple of, this film was a bit, it won some awards, it got a lot of notice. He's getting support.
Well, that box set is pretty impressive as far as like it is not a cheap box set. It's not like a flimsy piece of cardboard they stick DVD cases in. That was a really nice box set.
One of my favorite sayings in life is two things can be true. Someone could be a good father and a horrible person. This guy, I like him as a creator, as a writer, as a person. I don't think just like I will like him, but I like him enough to A, buy that box set, B, talk about the movies. I will talk about the rest of the movies, and just as a summary of this guy and his projects, I actually want to go further and see what he's done, because he is really someone that is, we've spoken about this guy for nearly over an hour, so obviously he's got our curiosity to a certain extent. And I don't even know what C is, but yeah, I will just, he's got my curiosity, and he got a lot of his curiosity, and I'm glad that I feel very mixed about this movie now, but sometimes, that's what I love about cinema, I guess. I'm not one of those, and actually I should say this for the record. I know in the past I've said, I'm a hipster, and I like hipster movies. To be honest, I'm not one of those guys that likes finding these indie directors that do these snuff films or crazy films. I don't have a lot of those movies as part of this filmography. I feel like I'm apologizing now, but yeah, every once in a while I think we're going to get a few curveballs, and this is definitely been one of them.
Well, and I'll say this too, just to wrap up, I still like it better than I Love You, Daddy. That is still the worst movie we've watched on this.
Yeah.
And to me, actually, more uncomfortable than I Am a Sex Addict. So you can get cringier than this guy, and Louis C.K. managed to do it. So yeah, but this was I'll say this: I'm glad I saw it as a thing that I can. Like, I have a thing where it's like I'll see a certain flavor of potato chip, or I'll see a certain flavor of whatever, and I'll go, that's probably not any good, but I'm curious enough to taste it. And that's what I feel like with this is I'm glad I saw it. I didn't particularly like it, but I'm glad I saw it.
And I appreciate you checking out, James. So yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. Again, I'll put all the links to everything I mentioned regarding Caveh in the description. I don't even know when I'm going to get... I don't have the time to even do this big Caveh discussion that I wanted to, but he has definitely got my curiosity, because that movie I mentioned about the Sheik and I mean, that was probably even more controversial than this movie. And he doesn't even... This is the thing about him that I'll finally say. It's not like he seeks controversy. It's just his personality and his belief system. It's kind of radical. I'm sorry. His honesty, his level of honesty is just kind of radical. And, you know, he's brave enough to put it on film. So then everyone's like, yeah, we're going to fund this shit because this guy's hilarious, or this guy's weird, or this guy's on the edge. Whatever it is. So, yeah. Caveh, I forgot his surname. Yeah, it's I Am A Sex Addict. That's in the bag now.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And you know what's funny, James? That talking about that movie made me feel a bit exhausted.
Uh-huh.
And for our next discussion, oh boy.
Yeah.
It's not more of the same, but it's definitely that's a film. The next film we're going to be talking about is we're going to finally finish off the Before Sunrise Sunset by going to Before Midnight, the last of the trilogy of that movie. A heavy one for sure. And I'll have some updates on that movie, because apparently there was many talks of a sequel to Before Midnight. But we'll get into that on the next recording. So guys, go and watch that movie. If you like our previous discussion on those movies, look forward to that one. James, have you got anything else to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we exhausted this conversation, though I think it was a very interesting one the whole way through. But
yep.
Yeah, beyond that, anything else I could say about this would just be repetitive at this point. Sure.
So on that note, James, where can the people find you if they want to get in contact with you?
They can find us at manic-expression.com, which, by the way, I believe it is next week, it's the 25th, is our 10-year anniversary.
Hey, James, I don't know if this podcast will be out on that date, so I might have to apologize. It probably will be, because I got a week, right? I got 7 days. I'll try to release it on the anniversary day, so maybe we can send some love your way. But congratulations to you, and I love being a part of... Well, I'm still a member of Manic Expression. I just don't post there anymore because, you know, I could post these discussions on there, but I don't think... No, I'm not going to bother. But yeah, no, congratulations to you, James. Manic Expression, you created a great site. I know it wasn't just you. You had a whole team behind you. Yeah, congratulations, man. That's a monumentous achievement, man. So, Manic, talk a bit more about Manic Expression for those listening who might not know what Manic Expression is.
Well, it is. It's a site where, you know, you don't have to post on it as much as you did 10 years ago when sites like ours started, because it is an aggregate site, and that's a thing that isn't as it's sort of a relic in that way, but it is it's a community of people who are very supportive, very interesting debates can happen there without ever having it descend into the kind of awful things that happen on the rest of the internet. So if you ever want to go there and, you know, post your video and post your blog, you might not get the most hits that you get in other places, but you at least meet some nice people and have interesting conversations without getting into a fight with somebody who's going to tell you to go kill yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to just make new friends with a smaller community. You know, you can get lost in the YouTubes and Twitters and Facebooks. But, you know, it's a good old-fashioned community blog and video media sharing site where I made a lot of good friends as well, including yourself. So congratulations to you, James, on the decade anniversary. So amazing, amazing. You can find me at Planet Tyro, but we've got that Linktree link where everything that we mentioned is all in one link. So you don't have to remember to click this, click that, click this, click that. It'll all be in our Linktree link, which I'll link below. But yeah, with that said, next time, again, we'll be talking about Before Midnight. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys have had a happy New Year, Christmas break, although we're at the end of January now. And for our Valentine's episode, it's going to be Before Midnight. How apt is that, huh? You know, they actually say there's like breakups rise more after Valentine's Day than people getting together.
I think breakups rise more after people see Before Midnight.
That too. So on that note, we're going to get the hell out of here. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to leave us a rated review on iTunes if you feel so inclined. And we'll see you on the next recording.